All right, so welcome to Intuition to Income. This is Abby Gooch, and I am so excited to be here as always because I love spending time with each and every one of you and love interviewing these amazing friends slash experts slash speakers from around the world. And today, I believe it's from London, somewhere in Europe, I'm interviewing Kate Bindo, and she's just such an amazing soul. And I'm so excited to hear what she has to say. And most importantly, just before we get started, I just wanted everybody to take a moment to connect with their intuition. And I just told Kate, I really trust that that wisdom within us always knows, no matter what confusion or upset or maybe excitement and bliss we have going on, there's still this underlying sense of knowing, connection to the universe, connection to each other, and connection to our intimacy, right, with ourselves and everything in life. So with that, Kate, I just want to invite you to Intuition to Intimacy and just have you share a bit about yourself and how you got on this journey of following your intuition.
Hi, Abby.
Hi.
Nice to be here. The honest answer is I don't ever remember not being on it. I think I was really, really blessed because my maternal grandparents were very, very they would have said connected to nature. So they were very mindful in everything that they did. They ate seasonal food. My granddad died when he was in his 90s, but he could still touch his toes. He didn't take any tablets for anything. Like every morning he had a little routine that he did where he opened the window and took big, deep breaths of fresh air, and then he did some stretches and, did all sorts of things that going back to when he started doing them were kind of a little bit out there, and he just didn't see it as anything other than making the most of life and trying to improve himself. But actually a lot of the things that he did we now know would have helped him stay calm, and he used to do things like eye exercises every day, which in recent years have been proven that they can improve your eyesight. But when he was doing them, it was like, really? Everybody just thought that he was playing.
Wow.
But, I grew up with all that just being normal. Yeah. So I can't ever remember not listening to my gut feeling or, sort of trusting that inner knowing. It was just something that as a family, I suppose we always did.
Yeah, I love that you said gut feeling, because I think sometimes we need real physical, practical ways of connecting to that knowing, to that wisdom. And that's why I always take people through those steps of the head, the heart, and the gut, really moving through, the outside world, including our own thoughts, our own experiences. Like for me, a lot of trauma healing, just also chaos. There's so much energy in the world. I know we're all probably really empathetic, right? Just feeling energies and connecting it from the heart, right? So then those thoughts start to come into love so things can soften. And then we move it into our belly. And then there's that inner compass, that knowing of expansive yeses or constrictive nos. And, for intuition to intimacy, it's like when we have a clear intention of greater intimacy with ourselves, or in this case, to attract the love of our life. Some of us have, some of us are deepening it, some of us are, other people might be trying to find it. Wherever you're at in your journey is perfect. But to trust that gut, so you have your intention and your intuition to guide you. So I'm wondering, Kate, what has been maybe some stories or experiences you've had of trusting your intuition to greater intimacy with your current partner, or maybe in helping clients, find greater intimacy?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I can remember as a teenager, I was probably 14, 15 years old, having a sleepover with one of my best friends and having that typical teenage discussion of, how old are you going to be when you get married? How old are you going to be when you have kids? And of course, at that age, not knowing anything about the concept of manifestation or any of that stuff, I just went, well, I'm going to, enjoy life and, maybe go to university, and then, I don't know, I reckon I'll kind of settle down and have kids when I'm 26, 27. And all my friends used to say things like, so like, who's your ideal man? And they were all, you know, Brad Pitt and, you know, all the sort of big names at the time. And I'd be like, I don't know, there's not really anybody. I just want somebody who's caring and who's, you know, going to be a good dad. And, you know, like it was more about the personality traits than the physical body. So fast forward, like nearly 10 years, and I'm at my friend's wedding. And she'd asked me to sing. I used to do some singing when I was younger. She'd asked me to sing, and her cousin was doing like the big gig. And all my friends were winding me up, oh God, it's so romantic, and you know, you're going to fall for each other. I was like, don't be so ridiculous. This is not some sort of, you know, Hollywood film. This is, you know, this is real life. And I turned up for the first rehearsal 2 weeks before the wedding, and I could not get to sleep that night. I met my now husband that night, and I honestly can't explain it. He's older than me, not massively, but, you know, I certainly wouldn't have gone out with him when I was in my teens. And he'd already got a son, which, you know, at sort of 24, 25 is, you know, a huge thing to take on. And I just never questioned it. Mm. We were, you know, together for a matter of weeks when he said, you know, I'm moving house. Do you want to help me look for somewhere? Would you move in with me? Bearing in mind, he lived 100 and odd miles away from where I was living at that point. I was like, yeah. And I can still remember lying in bed and thinking, okay, when's that feeling going to come? That kind of sick, oh my God, what have I said? How am I going to get out of this one? And it didn't come. And I thought, God, maybe this is the right thing to do. A couple of months later, we were engaged. 2 years later, we were married. Wow. 3 years later, we got our daughter. And it just kind of, it's, you know, it hasn't been plain sailing. You know, I don't think any relationship ever is, but I just knew. You know, from that first meeting. And he was the same. He still carries a lucky penny that he got the day after we met, because he went on the stag do that weekend, and they went to the seaside, and there was a machine that you could make a wish and get a lucky penny, and his wish was to spend more time with me. And he's still got the penny, because he's like, what if I lose it? What if I lose it and then I lose you? And, you know, so he's got it like safely almost sewn into his wallet now, because he's really superstitious about it.
That's so cute. It's his anchor.
Yeah, we just kind of both knew. And, you know, we both had relationships before. Obviously, you know, he'd got, you know, his son, so, you know, he'd had serious relationships before. But we just, yeah, just instantly knew.
Yeah, it's nice when it's so clear, and it just feels right. And it's really that simple. Like when it feels right, it's right. But it's not, it's not. You know?
Before that, I'd had relationships where I'd been desperate for it to feel right, and there'd been niggles, you know, they'd leave something in my bathroom and it'd just make me go, oh, why has he done that? You know, I don't want this stuff in my space. And yet I thought that it was really serious. But you just, yeah. And I think we're told, aren't we, with relationships that you've got to work at it, and it doesn't come easy. So if you're not careful, you can put too much effort into the wrong relationship, trying to make it fit and trying to beat that feeling.
So yeah, I think there's a difference between the feeling and the knowing, because like in my partnership, I know it felt right, and I continued as it felt right from that intuition. But the moment it doesn't feel right, look at it. It's a knowing, not a feeling. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, your gut knowing. So to kind of see the difference between your knowing and your feeling. You know, I don't know if you want to share anything about that.
Yeah, it's something really deep, isn't it? Yeah. It's such a fundamental part of who we are.
Yeah.
That just, it's like you're anchored to something. And you don't really have any control over it. Like with my husband, every alarm bell in the world was going off in my head. how am I going to cope with this? I'm going to be bringing up somebody else's child for some of the time. And, all those kind of rational thoughts were there, but there was this deep understanding that it was just, it just got to be, that it wasn't even something that I could question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think, it's like your soul just kind of is already there. And if you deny it, then you're kind of ripping a part of you away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you can't deny truth. And I think that's, intuition is very much truth within you. And it's your guidance, right? And so it's kind of like, that's true or that's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the challenges that you've seen in either working with people or in your own life around following and trusting your intuition, or their intuition, rather?
I think we live in a world, don't we, where everything has to be explainable. Everything has to be quantifiable. I see it a lot in the work that I do with schools. We don't look at children, we look at the statistics around the children. Yeah, and I think it's very easy to think that following your intuition somehow invalidates your intelligence. Does that make sense?
I think intuition is the highest intelligence, but that's just me.
I really do. But I've had people say to me things like, well, I'm far too intelligent to believe any of that.
Oh, fascinating. Well, studies have actually shown your intuition, your gut intelligence is actually way stronger than your mind or your heart. So your heart is actually stronger than your mind, and your gut is stronger than your heart. And I want to say there's like 500 million cells in your gut that's constantly picking up information. So that's why our bodies know. That's why we talk about, tuning the bodies to that state of harmony of love, with love, because it's constantly picking up information.
And we now talk about the gut as our second brain, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Why what we eat is so important.
Yeah.
Because by feeding our bodies the wrong thing, we're sending it all off. Off track. So it's but I think it's something that we're only just coming round to understanding. For centuries and centuries it was just the norm, wasn't it, to trust your instincts and to to have that knowing. Then we sort of, I don't know, we made it all academic, and it was all about the information that you could learn and the facts that you could spew, rather than that deep understanding of what was going on around us. And I think, I think that's why I'm struggling with the education system at the minute, because we see teachers going into schools and understanding on a really deep level what the children in front of them need, but they're being told to deliver something different sometimes. And there's that conflict then between, what they know they should do and what they're being told they've got to do.
Yeah.
I think, it's the same in a lot of society, isn't it? I think, we're told that we need to look for a partner who's successful and rich and that can provide for us and that can give us a lifestyle rather than giving us a feeling.
That's a good point. It's a superficial, I know for me, like I wrote my list, like six-pack, green eyes, whatever, right? And then the actual truth of the relationship is in the feeling, like you just said, right? Like, how do I feel with this person,
Yeah. And if it is superficial, if you do marry somebody for their bank balance or the car they drive or the house they live in or the status they have or how they look, we know that all that can just disappear in a heartbeat. We all age, we can all have changes of circumstance, we can all lose that job that's given us the financial security and, lose all the trappings of that lifestyle. And then what are you left with if you haven't got that feeling and that, that deep connection with somebody?
Yeah, I think I like that you said deep connection. Yeah. Again, going back to that knowingness, that it feels right to stay together or right to take the next step or whatever it is, because it's like deeper even still, just dropping in, my business manager talks about that, like dropping in. I think it's because early on in my practice, I talked about intuition, like if you were to take a pebble and drop it into the bottom of a lake, it would go through all these different layers and then it'd settle at the bottom. And there's this stillness, there's this peace, this quietness, that when we can find that in ourselves, we can attract that right mate partner for wherever we are in our lives, because it's attracting that higher soul level love, that higher perspective of unconditional love, freedom, and joy, right? Because that is our essence. So I think to center ourselves, and I'm wondering if there's a way that you have that helps you to center yourself and your intuition when I know you're not dating now, but for those of you watching, if you're dating or meeting somebody for the first time even, that feeling you get, how would you guide somebody into experiencing their intuitive center?
I think the most important thing is to get to a place where you are completely contented with who you are.
Wow.
Because until you understand yourself, until you've got that connection with you, you can't find the right person to connect with.
Yeah.
How many times do we talk to
people, but it's a journey. Yeah.
Yeah. But, so often we hear people say, I just got to the point where, I'd been looking and looking for Mr. Right, and then I decided I didn't need anybody and I could do it by myself and I was completely happy where I was, and then boom, in he walked. Yeah, and I think it's because we get to that place where we understand ourselves, and at that point we can really attract what we need and what's a good match for us. And until we understand that and until we get to that place, so I think really being honest about who we are and, all our quirks and all our, little foibles that we've all got, there's somebody out there that's going to think that it's adorable that, your face is a bit wonky or, you eat some weird combination of food or whatever it is. But we have to make peace with that first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. So I know something funny. When I was a kid, so my nose is very differently shaped than a lot of people. And I remember as a kid, I said, why can't I just have a normal nose? Why can't I just be like everybody else, right? And so eventually I learned to love it. I was like, you know what? I'm different than everybody else. Like, that's what makes me beautiful, whatever. Like, I really changed my story. So on our first date with my current partner, that's what he said. He said, I love your nose. I love the aqua line, right? Like, he was like, that's the thing he fell in love with. But to your point, I'm sure there was more, but he really highlighted that. So to your point, it's like once I learned to love that, then he loved it. And it could have been somebody else, that loved it too. I'm sure other people do, but I had to get to that point. And so that is, one of the things that I said, I don't know, months ago, I remember you loved my nose, So it's like whatever your quirk is or whatever's authentic and different and unique about you, exactly what we said is perfect for you and somebody else. And honestly, it's perfect for the rest of the world because you are perfect. Like that is the intimacy with yourself I love that's what you said, really getting contented with yourself.
And it's, there's so many levels to it.
Yeah.
I had exactly the same thing. I was picked on at primary school for having a big nose.
Oh, really? Nobody ever said anything. It was just my own judgment.
Yeah, it's true. And then, as a teenager, I kind of went all hips and I can remember getting comments about that and I hated it. And then I went through not a unique journey, but a fairly unusual journey. About 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with a condition called acromegaly, which is a pituitary tumour. And it made my body produce too much growth hormone. So I had my daughter, and within, it felt like weeks, my body just started changing shape. So I went up 6 ring sizes. My hands got really wide. My face completely changed. My eye shape, the shape of my mouth, my nose widened, my jaw thickened, all my eyebrows got really thick. I gained 3 dress sizes, probably 4. 4 shoe sizes, my entire body. We laugh now, and my husband calls it Kate the Princess Fiona years, because it was literally like, you know, I turned into an ogre, which isn't true, obviously. And I,
No, it's beautiful.
I don't want to offend anybody, you know, who has the condition, because it, you know, it's painful and really debilitating.
Yeah.
But I was told when I was diagnosed that all those symptoms wouldn't go back. I was having to wear men's shoes. So I was, you know, wearing boots all the time. Obviously, the fact that I was in a lot of pain and I was tired and things put a lot of strain on our relationship. And I was incredibly fortunate that the world's leading surgeon in pituitary surgery just happened to be based down the road in Birmingham. And literally within hours of having the surgery, I could feel my body changing back. And it was a really gradual process, but it gave me a whole new understanding of accepting myself physically as well as accepting like my internal person. Mm-hmm. Because I went from having a body that I was really critical of, but that was me, to having a period of time where I looked in the mirror and couldn't recognize myself. Mm-hmm. Which, you know, whatever I was going through and whatever I thought about myself, I always loved the fact that I had a twinkle in my eyes. Yeah. And I could, you know, be a little bit overweight and I could hate this and hate that when I was a teenager, but I always liked that I had a twinkle in my eyes, and I didn't. I lost that. And it was really difficult. And then I was so fortunate for most of the symptoms to then go again, mm-hmm. that it really kind of, it opened my eyes to a lot of things. It opened my eyes to how teenagers feel, because mm-hmm. a lot of the symptoms that I had were what we go through in puberty, and going through that in your 30s is a very different experience. Yeah. So it gave me a really deep understanding of that, which has been invaluable bringing up, you know, my children. Mm-hmm. But it also gave me a really interesting insight into how we feel about our internal and external selves. Mm-hmm. And I was really grateful that I had a really deep acceptance of who I was as a person, not just what everybody else could see. Mm-hmm. You know, that kind of, you know, the shell that we walk around in might have changed, but I was still me inside. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's actually really beautiful. I remember one of my best friends growing up in high school got lupus. And it was similar to what you had, like in the sense of the symptoms, like her whole body puffed up. I remember she came over and gave me a hug and was like, "Do you still love me? Will you still be my friend?" And I was like, "Of course, like I love you even more, you know." And it's like, actually a few months ago, I remember I took my partner traveling and my face puffed up and I was like, "I don't want to see your mom. Will you still love me?" And so I think our mind can, you know, latch on to how something looks, and if it changes or whatever the shape, like you said, the shell. But so, I mean, we all know this, but so importantly, it's like who we are inside and how we show up in love, and that can never be taken, right? No matter what we're going through, even emotional trauma or mental stuff, any of it, like the heart is still there. And I think to come back to that and remember who we are as that soul love for ourselves and for others, it's just beautiful. You know, I don't really have anything else to say other than to validate. I totally agree. It's beyond form. It's infinite, right? Like we are infinite. And for whatever reason, having that experience, you know?
And it was, you know, I'm so grateful for it. And people say, you know, how did you get through it? And would you change it? And I'm like, no, God, no. You know, I've been through all sorts of difficult things. And you learn so much from them, you know, and everybody changes. You know, if you're in a relationship for even 10 years, that person's going to change inside and out countless times, you know, whether it's getting grey hairs or putting on a few pounds or, you know, getting wrinkles or,
Right.
you know, and if you're only invested in that relationship for the physical stuff, then, you know, you're going to have a lot of adapting to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, we change internally as well.
Yeah.
I can remember my dad saying when I was a teenager, one of his close friends got divorced. And he said, we were talking about it, and I said, you know, what's that all about, Dad? You know, I thought when you got married you stayed together forever, you know, typical naive, you know, childlike approach. And he was like, you know, sometimes people just grow apart. He said, you know, I'm grateful every day that as your mum and I have, you know, grown through our lives, we've always managed to grow together. He said, but sometimes couples just can't. And, you know, I thought it was so lovely that from his perspective in, you know, a marriage at that point of, you know, 15 years, whatever it was, that he could see that actually sometimes relationships do have to end, and it's not, you know, some sort of blame fest. It's just, you know, sometimes people grow and they change. And, you know, if people grow in a way that isn't compatible anymore, then, you know, it just has to be accepted, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
You
I
know,
love that you said that you don't have to blame or judge or criticize yourself or the other person.
no. You know, and we do it all the time with friendships. You know, we have new friends that come into our lives. You know, there's this saying, isn't there, a reason, a season, or a lifetime? And
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes that's true for sort of, you know, relationships in a sort of romantic sense as well. That kind of, you know, sometimes we have, you know, we have the boyfriend in our teens who treats us in a certain way, and we learn that we're not having that again. And then, you know, we might have, you know, a marriage even when we're younger that we need to learn from, or that we then grow apart from. And, you know, that's okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
not everybody gets that, you know, meets at 15 years old and is still together, you know, when they die. Not everybody gets that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not all supposed to, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that because I did this little comparison thing like, why didn't I just have this like perfect little life? Well, I found Prince Charming at 20 and had these kids and blah, blah. And it's like, I had some other charming life, right? I started a business and changed the world. We all have our own charming lives. So I think to not
Yeah.
compare, but I noticed how I would do that, you know, just like it looks perfect. And then, you know, you talk to your best friend and you're like, hey, it's not quite that easy, but it's still like, I think that, you know, on this comparison note, you know, that's also one of the ways that I've actually hurt my partner is comparing him, you know, to really not compare myself or my partner because, yeah, it's just hurtful. It actually de-authenticizes us, you know? It really tears down our uniqueness.
And we never, you know, we never know what's going on for other people, do we?
Yeah.
You know, you can see a couple and think that they've got the perfect life. You know, they're wearing the right clothes, driving the right car, their kids, you know, seem perfect. But we're just seeing a snippet. You know, even people that we know well, we never completely see what their relationship's like. And I know over the years, because I'm knocking on a bit now, you know, I have had friends who've gone through divorce and, you know, separation, and it's been really painful. And from the outside, some of them, you know, right up until the very end, you would have sworn that they were the happiest couple on the planet, and then bang, it, you know, it's over. And then afterwards you find out exactly what was happening. And, you know,
Yeah.
it's very easy to cover it up, isn't it? You know, it's the social media life, isn't it? You know, you don't show the times when the kids are playing up. You show the times when they're being perfect. And, you know, you
You know,
put
right?
pictures on when your hair's a mess, you know.
That's so true. One of my girlfriends, she like posted all these beautiful pictures of her family and I adore her family. And then I call her, you know, like a week later, the kids are like fighting in the background and she's like, will you just be quiet, please? Like, you know, that's real. And both are real, right? Like the beautiful family is real and so is the like kids playing in the background fighting, you know, but it is true. It's like the full spectrum of life, you know?
Yeah. And, you
Yeah.
know, we don't want to share all the negative stuff, do we? You know? And it doesn't matter, you know, even the people that we really confide in,
Right.
you know, there's things that you don't want them to know about your relationship because you don't want them to hold it against your partner or your husband because you know, it's a transient thing. It's not a permanent change. They've just, you know, they've had a bad day or,
Right.
you know, they've said something hurtful or, and you don't want anybody else to be holding that over them
Yeah.
because, you know, it's not the reality of the situation, but,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
It doesn't change the fact it happened.
Yeah.
But we keep that to ourselves. And,
Right.
you know, that's okay too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, either one. I'm the one that probably says too much. I'm always like, it's like, would you please stop talking to everybody? Privacy, please. I'm like, I'm just an extrovert. I'm an introvert. So yeah, totally. Beautiful. So let's see, what else can I ask you and can we share? You know, I'm actually thinking about children and how intuition to intimacy. So as you're with your partner or your husband in such a loving way, how that naturally plays out to your children and everybody around you, kind of like we've talked about before in some other interviews, a ripple effect of love. So not sure what the question is other than how do you feel following your intuition has created a greater positive impact on the world around you?
I think it's interesting because my children have grown up without knowing any different.
Mm-hmm.
My husband's son, you know, I didn't meet him until he was 6, so he was still little. But he didn't live with us all the time. Obviously, you know, I'm not his mum, so there's no biological tie.
Yeah.
But even he kind of accepts it all. And, you know, it's fascinating to watch how the children respond to things. You know, they just seem to know when, you know, their friends are in trouble or, you know, when it comes to, you know, exams and, you know, choosing what subjects to take at school and that sort of thing. They just kind of accept and get on with it and just know what they need to be doing. And they don't always acknowledge it in that way, but I can kind of see that there's just this understanding that that's what they need to do. And I think children are so intuitive. You know, they walk into a room and they know if, you know, somebody's had an argument or, you know, if there's somebody that they don't want anything to do with, you know, and I think I learned really early on, even though when I was ill, I wasn't as in tune with things because I had too many other things going on. I learned really early on that if my daughter didn't want to, you know, say goodbye to somebody or give them a hug or just to let her accept that and you know, not to push it and to give her the option to wave across the room rather than giving somebody a kiss or, you know, that sort of thing. Because for whatever reason, she didn't feel like she wanted to be that close to that person, and that's okay. You know, and it wasn't always something that the other person was doing. It could have been that she was feeling something that she didn't want to pass on, you know?
Absolutely. To honor those boundaries.
Yeah. And I think, you know, certainly when I was growing up, there was a real expectation that children did, you know, especially with family members, give them a hug and a kiss when they, you know, were saying goodnight or, and I think our generation have kind of seen that it's okay not to, because let's be honest, we all walk into rooms and go, I don't want anything to do with you, you know, and we don't always know why, do we? But, you know, we just get that vibe. And I think we, you know, we used it on so many levels, don't we, our intuition, you know, whether it's making business choices or relationship choices or, you know, friendship choices or just, you know, who we want to spend more time with at a party or a, you know, a networking event. You know, and I think we need to make sure that we honour that in our children as well as acknowledging it for ourselves, because it isn't something that needs to be taught. You know, it's something is just part of us, and if we're not careful, we invalidate that by forcing them to go against it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, it's, mm-hmm. I think it's really important that we nurture that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, to really honor what their intuition, our intuition, but also other people's intuition is saying, what feels good for them or not, because that's going to be harmony or not, in intimacy or in a simple thing as walking into a networking room, which is obviously some level of intimacy because you're connecting emotionally and physically at some point, with everybody, and in school, in friendships in general. I just really love that, to honor the intuition in another as well as ourselves.
Yeah. And I think with teachers as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know that as a teacher, there were children that I bonded with easier than others. And I know that my children have bonded with certain teachers on a deeper level. And, they've found certain teachers that they just click with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And while it's probably not acceptable as a teacher to say, I'm not talking favourites, it's not something that, it's not that I would have had anything against any of the other children in the class, but there were certain children that I could identify with, or,
mm-hmm.
That had got a story that just, meant more somehow.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be as simple as their energy, can't it? You get this little bundle of joy and they walk into the room and there's just something about them and you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But you just fall in love with them,
Right. Yeah. It's the soul, right? It's their spirit. It's their intuition. Like, oh my goodness, beyond the form, right? Like we were talking about, it's the energy that like you can feel. You don't need to even speak it. You just feel it and know it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So what are the clients that you work with? Like, tell me a little bit more about how you're doing this intuitive work in the world now and how people can connect with you if they want to deepen their intuition around this stuff.
Okay, well, I used to be a teacher.
Of course.
You may have gathered. And I've, over the years, followed my intuition to a place where, well, I never dreamt that it would take me. When I was doing all my teacher training, I wouldn't have been able to mention any of the work that I do in schools now because it would have been totally taboo. But I now work in schools teaching relaxation and mindfulness and all sorts of magical things. I take crystals into schools. I take essential oils into schools. I talk about energy and, feeling the energy in their hands and all those things that would have been witchcraft 20 years ago when I did my teacher training qualification. I would have been straight out the door.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely a mental health crisis among our children at the minute.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of factors involved, I think. Parental stress is obviously one of them. But I think, the pressures that are put on children in schools as well and all the testing and that sort of thing. So yeah, I go in and I help teachers to help the children. I help, the children themselves. I go in and teach classes and yeah, and I still use my intuition every day. I'll get a message from a school saying, I really love what you're doing, but we've just got no budget. We're an inner city school and there's just nothing we can do about it. How can you help? And I kind of get this little knowing that goes, do you know what? Just go do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Or, just send them that pack. I think that'll really help. Or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And
totally.
It's something that, yeah, I said at the start, didn't I? I can't ever remember not using it. So I can't imagine ever doing anything that didn't involve it in some way, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the most natural thing. Like, it's our innate intelligence. So I think really our biggest block is when our mind gets in the way because we're always being moved. That intuition, that innate wisdom of our body, of our heart, of this energy that we're feeling constantly. It's like a dance in motion. We are being moved. And, the studies, I've done a lot of studies around like CEOs in business, like the ones that are following their intuition, it's the highest success rate. It's the same in relationships. It's the same in health. It's, I've healed myself intuitively, or known what to buy, like what to eat, what doctor to work with, or it's like everybody has this. So I think it's an acknowledgement of what we already know more than anything. Like we're already doing it. We already are innately intelligent through our intuitive wisdom. And can we trust it? Can we really trust it?
Yeah. I ended up doing some work a couple of years ago for the Church of Jediism.
Really?
Yeah, I know. That was my reaction too.
What is it? I don't even know. I mean, I can guess what it is, but...
Yeah. It's exactly what you think. Almost. I had an email from a wonderful lady called Teresa Chung, who's a spiritualist author. She does a lot of work with angels and the afterlife, asking whether I was interested in doing some work with them. And my first image, I'll be honest, was of people sitting around in Jedi robes with a Yoda on an altar. And I was like, how does this work? But actually, it's a church in the old-fashioned sense, as in, a group of like-minded people coming together with the same ideas. And basically, they use the Star Wars films to help them get through life and to make sense of the world. And obviously, there's some really obvious, good versus evil type stuff. But they started up some online courses to help male mental health, basically, because obviously suicide rates among young men is, the statistics are just terrifying. So what they wanted to do is to try and give them some tools. And again, that was, it was purely an intuitive thing. When I first saw it, I thought, I can't ever imagine being able to say that I'm doing this and still go into schools with any credibility. But as soon as I talked to them about it, it was like the hairs on the back of my neck went up, and I was like, this is just, it's too important not to do, So I threw myself into it, created a course for them, all about mindfulness, and, they've got nutrition courses and all sorts of amazing things, self-defense and just about everything.
Wow.
And, it's, if you'd said to me that I was going to end up at Comic-Con on a panel when I was a teacher, I would have laughed in your face, but it happened. Because, again, it was an intuition thing, They asked and it felt right. And I've turned down all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just know that something's worth doing and that it's the right choice.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes I know when I've done work with like companies or school systems, I would follow my intuition into a building, and in that moment it wasn't right, but later it was. Like I'm thinking of this one time, it's called WeWork, and I went up to this building and like my intuition says like, maybe I could work with somebody in this company, and I didn't then, but it was like 6 or 7 years later, I don't know, it was a long time later that I got asked to speak there, and I was like, wow, like some part of us knew. And I don't know if you guys have ever done that. Like you go down the street and you're like, oh, I knew I went down the street before and now I'm actually here. It's like it presupposes it. It's a premonition, it knows. And intuition is also beyond intellectual understanding. That's why sometimes like our mind will spin or it has a hard time like catching up because it's already going. The innate intelligence of our body is already flowing. And then the 20% of our conscious mind is trying to understand it. So I guess I'm just saying this, like when it feels right, it's right, and trust it and go with it. And if not now, maybe later. And just trust that you are being guided by that gut feeling. So, yeah,
And we see it in relationships as well, don't we? You hear all the time about couples who met in their teens and it didn't work and they both married somebody else, and then, 25 years later they bump into each other in the bank or something and they both just got divorced, and suddenly, it's there, and it wasn't right at the time, but
yeah, totally, timing, and like you said, compatibility and alignment and growing together or not, and
sometimes you need the lessons before it'll work. We
Yeah.
can all sit and say, I wish I'd met you when, I met my ex, but
Yeah.
actually it might not have worked then. You change as a person because of
Right.
that relationship that you had. So, you could have met and it wouldn't have worked out because you didn't have all those tools that you need.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think it's like whatever relationship you're in, whether it's with yourself, with a current partner, a friend, a colleague, you're in the right relationship because it's teaching you exactly what you need to learn and grow, to become more of who you are. Is that loving expression.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add or share at all, Kate? It's such a pleasure having you on.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Just, I just think it's really important to remember to be happy and to be contented with who you are and where you are.
Yeah.
Because everything changes, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's permanent. And if things are difficult at the minute, then, just sit with it and ride it out.
Yeah.
But the important thing is, to find that happiness within yourself, not to look for it outside, I think.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips for that of how to look for happiness within? Because I love that full circle of contentment and intuition, right? Coming back to self and then to radiate that love out.
I think it's very easy if you're not feeling happy with yourself to constantly distract yourself,
Mm.
To lose yourself in the, Candy Crush or, the YouTube videos or a book or, whatever you use to distract yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important just to sit.
Yeah.
And to allow yourself to be, whether it's, meditation or journaling or, whatever helps you to understand yourself better.
Yeah.
Just take that time and be kind to yourself about it. It's not something that happens overnight, is it? We need to take that time and learn to love ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're all born loving ourselves, but other people impact on that, don't they?
Yeah, I remember my business manager, Sai, one time said, what would love do? What would love do? Just ask the question. And, if you were to take yourself out on a date, what would you do? What would you want? How would love treat you? One of the other speakers, Lisa Shields, asked me that question. She said, how would love treat you? How would you like love to treat you? And so, like, to do that for ourselves and also to be that, for our partners and the people in our lives. It's so simple.
To take yourself out on a date,
To what?
To take yourself on a date.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't got somebody to do it, then do it yourself.
Totally. Absolutely.
If you love going to the theatre, if you want to go and get a coffee, if you,
right.
There's a film that you want to see at the cinema, whatever it is, just do it.
Right.
Do it and do it the way you want to do it and, make it special. And, even if it's just going for a bath or, whatever you need to do, you don't need somebody else to do it for you. You can do that for yourself.
Yeah. So beautiful. And then you never know who might walk into the room.
You take yourself to the cinema or you take yourself to the coffee shop and you get sat next to the love of your life,
Exactly. Oh, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Kate. Thank you, everybody, for joining. The one last thing I always like to ask is one affirmation you like to leave the audience with. So something, a mantra they can say to themselves that every time they think of you and intuition to intimacy, they remember, this. Could be I am love, anything like that, something very simple.
Do you know what? My favorite is I can do anything I set my mind to. That's the one I come back to every time.
Beautiful. I can do anything I set my mind to. Beautiful. Awesome. All right, everyone. Namaste. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Bye.